thank you so much everyone for joining. Again, my name is Lucy Njeri Irungo. I will be your moderator for this session. And we are very glad that you're joining us for this timely conversation. So I am just going to give a brief on what our discussion today is about. And our discussion today, it's about, we are going to view what is the intersection between the Shirika Plan, which is the government of Kenya's plan, jointly with the United Nations, the UNHCR aim to have a working Shirika Plan by 2025. And what they are aiming to achieve with the Shirika Plan is transitioning refugee camps into integrated settlements. So within this discussion, we are going to understand what is the state of refugees in Kenya at the moment when we mean our refugee camps. We have a very great experienced panel that are going to share the experiences of refugees in Kenya. We are also now going to transition that to what it means to have integrated settlements, but more importantly, how this transition is going to affect our refugees in Kenya, with a very specific focus on urban refugees, especially young people. So without further ado, allow me to welcome Oscar Luchivia, who is the head of advocacy at the Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, who are our host for this webinar today. So Oscar is just going to give us a brief on what the coalition does and why this particular discussion is important to the coalition. So karibu sana, Oscar.
Thank you, Lucy. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to those who are outside the time zone that we come from in East Africa, and good evening as well to those who are further. My name is Oscar Luchivia, as it has been mentioned, and I am the Programs Officer of Peace Building and Youth Inclusion at the KCYPC Initiatives, and also the Head of Advocacy at the Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security. And I am delighted to join this conversation this morning to have this discussion and this conversation around the conversation that we've been looking into on integration, especially with the refugees that we have in our communities today, and also trying to cut across the plans that we have within the youth sector to accommodate all the representations that we have across, in that all the plans that we have are going to appreciate and support each of our youth needs and each of our youth freedoms and rights that we share. And about the Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security is a consortium of organizations that are looking towards coming up with a national action plan that will see the meaningful inclusion of youth across the country through the development of a national action plan. And it's in this light that we saw that it is also important to keep in touch and have this conversation with the communities that we have inclusively, without trying to develop a bias of representation of ideas. We come up with a plan that will ensure that it's collectively developed by all the representations that we have across the country. And it's with this regard that we have this conversation with 64 Voices, a member of the coalition, through also the support of the Kenya Urban Refugee Alliance, that is Kura, in developing of this conversation, and try to look at what are the plans that we have in place and where are we going forward in lobbying and advocating for a space that is all-inclusive. So it is with this regard that I want to first assure you that the co-chairs of our particular consortium, that is Christine Odera and Felix Orwaka, are fully aligned with the conversation that we're having today, and they have sent their word through me in ensuring that we can observe this conversation in the way that is based in us, and then also share the outputs towards the development of our national action plan, towards its validation and also just coming into action. So with that, I want to say thank you to you, Lucy, for agreeing to moderate this session, for you, Bior, bringing together all the esteemed and all these leading experts in the fields that they are coming from, to see this conversation come to place and also to just converge and have this timely conversation. So with that, I want to say thank you, and I look forward to this conversation. Santi.
All right. Thank you so much, Oscar. And I am seeing we have a very busy chat box. So kindly let's continue interacting through the chat box. Introduce yourself. We want to know who you are and how you are related to this topic of migration and displacement and its intersection with youth, peace, and security. So Habiba, nice to see you. Evans, Hani, Tolosa, Viola, Dorothy, Abdia, welcome everyone. Edward, good to see everyone. Welcome. So our first speaker for today, who is speaker for this session, is Bior Samuel Nathaniel Garang. So Bior is a South Sudanese microbiologist and a certified refugee community member. He survived the 1991 Bor massacre and has since then been spending his life as a protracted refugee in Kenya. So despite hardship, he empowers refugees through community building and advocates for their rights. He founded organizations such as the 64 Voices organization, which is actually one of our partner for this webinar today, and which is focused on refugee community rebuilding and refugee youth building, youth building community. So BR currently engages in peace building actions in Kenya and South Sudan. And above that, he has been very instrumental in helping us understand issues of migration and displacement within the coalition. So I welcome Bior to make his presentation, and he will be discussing with us what is the intersection between the Shirika Plan with the urban refugees challenges in Kenya. He will help us understand what the Shirika Plan is and how it is going to affect the urban refugee, while sharing his own personal experience as a refugee in Kenya. So karibu sana Bior.
Asante sana, Lucy, and thank you for that colorful introduction. I won't reintroduce myself again because those are my names that Lucy has said. I'm Samuel Bior Nathaniel Garang. I'm a South Sudanese urban refugee, what you call as a protracted urban refugee, an individual who has been in refugeehood for an extended period of time. I'm a youth community rebuilder, and we are part of the Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security through the 64 Voices organization, which I'm a co-founder, and several other organizations that I usually work with. Also notably among them is the Fields of Peace, where I'm a peace practitioner and an advocate to the promise to our children, which is a promise that tends to prioritize children in peace building and also youths in peace building efforts. So I'm going to briefly be taking us through the main discussion for today. Mine is more of like an introductory to the main discussion that our speakers, because our speakers are actually our stars for the day. So I'm just setting up the stage so that we can be much more aware of what the Shirika Plan is. And that's why I'm going to discuss on the intersecting the Shirika Plan with the urban refugee challenges in Kenya, because today we are trying to bring a spotlight on the urban refugee question that is not as much discussed like the other refugee situation. So I hope everybody is able to see my screen. If you can be able to see my screen, just give me a thumbs up, or you can be able to say that it's visible. So thank you, Bona Oscar. So what is the Kenya refugee burden? Most of us might not be able to know that Kenya is one of the host countries that has been hosting refugees for the longest time, not only in Africa, but also across the globe. And Kenya's record and history in terms of refugee hosting goes way back to the colonial period, where we saw that some of the East African community members actually found refuge in Kenya before pre-colonial periods, and that's when the Kenya's hosting of refugees began at that time. Now, Kenya has the second largest refugee population in East Africa. That's after Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is the one that hosts the largest refugee population in East Africa and also in Africa. But Kenya has a higher diversity of refugees compared to Ethiopia, because we see that the Kenyan refugees that Kenya hosts come from a different variety of countries, including as far away as from the Middle East. And Ethiopia, as much as it has the largest number of refugees compared to Kenya, those are actually from a fewer number of countries. So we usually see that the number of refugees that Kenya hosts is quite diverse, and that also gives Kenya a mix of metropolitan mixture of refugees in terms of it hosting refugees from different countries and from different communities. And that gives it a kind of like a challenge in terms of it being able to integrate these refugees who are coming from various backgrounds, coming from diverse and different cultures and from diverse countries. So when we look at the demographical distribution of the refugee population that we have in Kenya, we see that the urban refugee population is quite minimal. That is close to around 3.1%. In terms of the overall number of population, we see that that's around 89,999. That's the recent status that was actually given, I think, from 2002. And of the breakage down of those, we see that most of these Kenyan refugees in total, the majority are usually from Somalia, and the second largest group is from South Sudan. And we usually find that this the kind of population that tends to determine the policies that are usually designed by the Kenya government in terms of responding to the refugee populations, because those tend to be the majority of the refugees that are actually there. So in looking at the statistics, that's the slide that I've just kept. There's the actual statistics from the UNHCR and the Department of Refugee Services. And we can be able to see that the urban population, there's kind of like a funny distribution to some of the towns that you can be able to see that are represented here. And these are most of the towns such as Eldoret, where you see that there's a huge population of around 2,000 that is actually documented. And most of that seems to be from almost one ethnicity or from one country. That is, almost all are South Sudanese urban refugees. And that one tends to give you the dynamics of how the urban refugees tend to settle within towns, that they're distributed in towns in terms of the countries where they come from. And you'll find a huge burden of certain refugees from certain countries being exhibited in certain towns. And that one tends to give a demographic problem in terms of giving a policy that will be able now to handle the whole urban refugees as a holistic group. So, like I said, there are over 80,000 documented urban refugees, and there's still a lot of them who have not been documented, because there's a policy within the urban refugees that when you present yourself to the departments of refugee services or UNHCR, they tend to fear that might be able to lose, you might be able to lose certain privileges on account that when you are a refugee, you're supposed to be encamped. So most of the urban refugees who find themselves in the urban centers don't want to avail themselves to the registration departments, because they perceive that when you are registered, you'll be forced to go back to the refugee camps, because that's the current policy that is still there. And there are only certain allowances that are allowed for you to stay in urban areas when you are a refugee, because Kenya still has an encampment policy where no refugees are supposed to exist within the urban centers. So as much as we have 80,000 urban refugees in urban centers, the legal standing that Kenya has is that they're supposed to be within the refugee camps, and they're not supposed to exist within the urban centers unless under certain criteria. Either you came for medication, either you came for education, or you have been given an allowance or a pass to stay within the urban centers. Either you are employed, and that one also has a lot of legalities to it for you to be given that permission for you to stay. So we find that most of these urban refugees that stay within the urban centers actually stay in terms of a legal gray zone that we can be able to say is illegal. But for certain reasons, either looking for a better life or access to education or access to healthcare, then they find themselves staying within the urban centers and not willing to go back to the refugee conditions which are actually set within the refugee camps. So Like I said earlier before, South Sudanese constitute around 26.1% of the Kenyan refugee population, and they also tend to make a huge urban population that still exists within the urban centers. So before I move into the introduction of the Shirika plan, I'll just only like to mention one critical point that during the whole Kenya refugee hosting history, we've actually seen that the stoppage or the blockage of refugees from having free movement within the country actually started in 1991. So within 1991, there were some political changes that necessitated the restriction of refugees. But before 1991, refugees used to move freely within Kenya. Refugees were actually even given work permits, that the earlier refugees who came before 1991 were actually given work permits to the extent that they can freely be able to work in Kenya. Some were also extended Kenyan citizenship, especially for those who are married to Kenyans. They could be able to apply for Kenyan citizenship through registration. And that one gave them a lot of legal representation within the communities. But post 1991, when we saw the political shift, and this political shift actually happened within the border issues that escalated between Somalia and Kenya, that had to necessitate the political change that refugees had to be restricted and refugees had to be contained within the refugee camps. And that's where the whole history of refugee containment and forcing refugees to be within refugee camps came into. And the individuals who found themselves within the urban centers when those regulations were passed tend to land in some legal prison. So that's just a bit of the history that I needed to mention so that we'll be aware of it. So moving on to introducing what the Shirika plan is. The Shirika plan is basically a plan that is in place, that is being developed by the government of Kenya to be able to at least handle the issue of refugees, that is the general refugee population within Kenya. As we see, the Refugee Act was recently enacted. The 2023 Refugee Act was recently enacted and was passed and it became law. So it has regulations on how refugees are supposed to be handled in Kenya and how refugees are supposed to conduct themselves or be part of the communities. And within the act, there's a provision where the refugees are supposed to be integrated within the host communities. And as much as they lack the physical policies, the law is already there, but it's not fully implemented. And the Shirika plan is there to be able now to smooth out the integration of refugees and also the implementation of the Refugee Act, and also now be able to see how refugees affairs can be holistically handled by the various departments that are in charge of handling the refugees. So the Shirika plan, basically also known as the Marshall Plan, is just a government policy plan that is in development. It's not yet fully in development, and consultations were recently done as early as last year. And the second phase of the blueprint is still, I think, is still in place. So either before the end of next year or mid next year, the full Shirika plan should be out. And then I think maybe it should be disseminated, and the findings that have been found will actually maybe be shared, and they'll be seen how they'll be implemented as a legal document. So within the Shirika plan, there are actually 6 major pillars that the Shirika plan tries to handle. And some of them is system building. In terms of system building, how a refugee system is going to be built and integrated within the government system that are already in place. There's also the integrated services, such as how will refugees be able to receive the same services that the host communities are receiving without there being clashes. There are also skill development for refugees, so that when the integration of refugees within the host communities gets to be underway, then the refugees will not be disadvantaged to the extent that they do not have the needed skills for them to fend for themselves and for them to seamlessly integrate within the host communities. The fourth one is environmental management, that it has actually been noted that refugee camps have become kind of like an environmental hazard, to the extent that most of them tend to bring a lot of environmental degradation, be it maybe the removal of finite resources, the competition of resources with also host communities, and also rampant pollution because of the the sheer number of refugees that are actually enclosed within one environment, and that tends to bring a lot of environmental degradation and a lot of environmental pollution. So environmental management is one critical aspect within the Shirka plan, where they can be able to see when the refugees are integrated, the issues of environmental management can also be kept in place. There's also the economical development, where refugees are supposed to be developed so that they become self-reliant, and there's also durable solutions. And these durable solutions refers to the solutions where the refugees themselves as a community can be able to sustainably handle their affairs and also be able to manage themselves and sustainably live without outside intervention in terms of making them have a good quality of life. So the urban refugee challenges, there are a lot of challenges that the urban refugee face. Chief among them is the aspect that they are not legally recognized, and this tends to be a huge barrier in terms of the quality of life that the refugees can be able to live, because when you are not legally recognized, there's as much as you can be able to do. You cannot be able to work, you cannot be able to freely move because you see that you are not legally recognized. And there's also the aspect that you cannot even own simple things such as having a SIM card registered under your name, because in order for you to have these services, you must be legally recognized and you must be in legal standing where you can be able now to freely move, freely live, and be able to be a fully integrated member of the community. So most of the challenges include the opaqueness in citizenship and migration laws, which do not cover the urban refugees or clearly states the status where they are. And we see that most of the refugees tend to stay as undocumented. And the other issue is that the host communities themselves, the host communities usually see that there's an overstretch of services when you bring in another population, which is actually the urban refugees. And this kind of like overstretching of services is the one that actually tends to bring a lot of friction within the urban refugees and the host refugees. There's also the issues of conflicts with the refugees. This conflict might manifest itself in terms of maybe the clashes between the traditional beliefs or maybe the social structures that the various communities usually have, because you find that there are certain social practices that maybe might not be able to go hand in hand, and those ones tend to be able to bring conflicts. And we've seen these issues time and time again, them making headlines within local newspapers that where maybe South Sudanese urban refugees have gotten involved in certain altercations among their own communities that tends to make the host community feel a bit unsafe or a bit insecure. And then this kind of like build conflicts and mistrust among the communities, especially the urban communities and the refugees populations. There's also the concern from the refugees that there's a lack of recognition within the socio-cultural integration of them as a community, that you find they're not being given jobs. Those who are qualified are not fully integrated, and even if they are employed, then they are being exploited on the virtue that they are not fully registered or they are not like citizens, and that one gives a lot of issues in terms of exploitation and work. And there's also for the desire for permanent citizenship. As much as most of the data has shown that most of the refugees prefer to be resettled in third countries, such as the developed countries, it's not true to the extent of those urban refugees who have been protracted for a long period of time, because those urban refugees who have stayed for, let's say, maybe 30 plus years and above, tend to find themselves and they feel more integrated within the communities that they are in, that they do not prefer to be resettled to third countries, unlike the newly settled refugees who came into the country. And this one now tends to bring a lot of issues because they have the desire for them to be given Kenyan citizenship on the term that they have stayed for over 30 years. But now the legal system does not recognize your stay as a refugee as a grounds for you to be given citizenship. Unless you're married to a Kenyan or born to a Kenyan, then you can be able to apply, or unless when you came through other legally allowed channels, such as maybe having been an individual on a resident permit. Maybe you came on an investor resident permit, but not on a refugee status. So that desire for permanent residency and citizenship within Kenya tends to be another concern for refugees, and that's a concern that they usually have within the protracted refugees communities rather than those who recently came. So the basic analysis that we can be able to have there is that urban refugees still remain in a gray legal zone. They are still constrained in the fact that they are not recognized, and the organic integration within the communities are still not yet legally recognized as already being integrated. And that's why you find that the Shirika plan that is still in place does not recognize that these urban refugees who have already stayed for over 30 years within the local host communities have actually organically been already integrated, because the communities have already known them. They've already known the cultures and norms within the communities, and they have some kind of resemblance where they can be able to kind of like set up enterprises where they can be able to assist themselves. Most of them have already gone to school within the same host communities schools. They have qualified. They have professional qualifications, but because they are not legally recognized, they cannot be able to utilize those qualifications that they have gained for them to have meaningful income, or for them to be able to sustain themselves, and for them to live and fully integrate within the host communities. And so we find that as much as the refugee communities have had organic integration by themselves, it is the legal gray zone, the legal recognition that is missing, that is now not filling this link so that they become fully integrated members of the community. And that's where we see that the Shirika plan is actually missing that key concept, that these refugees have already integrated, but they just need to be legally recognized, and they need either, if it's citizenship, or for them to be given full legal recognition for them now to be able to fully sustain and integrate within the communities. So the Shirika plan, sustainability and durability, when it looks into those key aspects that the refugees are already integrated, and gives them the extra push where they can now be legally recognized and fully accepted within the communities, the host communities, then that can be able to give the Shirika plan a much more concrete, solid solution to the refugees. So in terms of recommendations for the Shirika plan, to the refugees communities, is for advocacy on their part, for the representation in all the planning phases, from the beginning to the implementation, as well as to the reporting of it. And when we see that the refugee communities are not integrated in the full process, then we'll be able to find that key information will not be gained from there. And it's unfortunate that at least the full integration of refugees is already looking to be shaky, because since the start of the Shirika plan, the involvement of refugee communities, or their consultation, was quite minimal compared to what was supposed to be done. Secondly, the refugees communities are supposed to emphasize their years of organic integration efforts within their communities, so that when they emphasize that they've already stayed within these host communities for a very extended period of time, they are well familiarized with the communities, and the only thing they need is for the legal integration, then that is going to make the transition much more easier, rather than the Shirika plan assuming that these refugees, the ones who have been extended for a period of time within the communities that they stay, have not yet integrated, because they've already known the communities, they're already known within the communities, and they can easily be able now to integrate. The only thing blocking them is the legal recognition. For the planners, is for them to ensure that the policies are aligning with the integration standards. And in terms of the integration standard, is to actually not see the refugees as another box to be ticked within the policies, but rather as individuals who have a say within the community, that when they're integrated, they are accepted as an holistic part of that community, but not just another add-on within the community. So also is to recognize and prioritize the protracted stays that these refugees have actually had within their communities. So when they've stayed for this long period of times, then that one should legally be recognized, so that those who are intending to have maybe citizenship, then there's no reason why you should be able to block somebody who has stayed within a community for over 30 years and having a legal gray zone, or maybe having a legal ladder or a legal wall to be able to block them from getting citizenship when they've already integrated within that community that they've stayed in for that extended period of time. Now, for the collective proposals, is to be able to simplify the pathway for naturalization and citizenship for refugees who have extended periods of stay. Secondly, is also to develop policies for refugees to be self-reliant through the economic inclusion and sustainable livelihood. And when we look at economic inclusion and sustainable livelihoods, then it's also good to be able to look at the refugee agencies themselves, because refugees do come with solutions. They are not just a burden. They come from the expelling countries when they already have skills that they have acquired. They also have a rich tradition of practices, which can also be a contributing factor that they'll be able to bring into their host communities. So they're not just individuals who are coming as blank slates. Like we have already seen in Kakuma, we have a lot of entrepreneurs who are coming from the Ethiopian communities, who are coming from the Somali communities, integrating well and bringing in the business practices and the entrepreneurial skills and the entrepreneurial spirits that they had. So these agencies can still be used to be able to assist the refugees to integrate within the communities and also give back and be contributing members to the communities. So in conclusion, and our call to action, the key takeaways that we should be able to take there is that the Shirika plan has a lot of potentials in terms of it being able to resettle refugees, be they urban or be they encamped refugees. But it should not be taken as a tokenism mechanism, in that it is being looked as a favor that is being done to the refugee communities, rather than it being looked as a holistic solution that is actually going to help both the refugee communities and the host communities. And when we remove that legal grace on from the Shirika plan and not making it so bureaucratic, kind of like looking at it from a humanitarian basis, where we look at refugees as human beings who can fully be able to integrate within the communities, but not at the bureaucratic or the political level, where some of the individuals think that when the refugees are integrated within the host communities, then they will also have a political shift, that one will be like a huge, massive voting block that is all of a sudden being dumped within a certain region or within a certain area. Because when we look at the 87 plus something thousand urban refugees, that's like a voting constituency. So when you integrate those numbers, that's an integration of another voting block, and that's what most of the politicians actually fear. And that's one of the reasons why you find that there's no political will for refugees to be integrated within the communities, the refugees that are willing to be integrated, for them to be integrated within the communities. It's just basically based on that political fear, where these extra voting blocks will be able to be set up overnight and changing or disrupting the political system that is there. So another call to action is that for us to be able to establish the urban refugees representations, such as maybe calling for an alliance, where we have already started what is known as KURA, the Kenya Urban Refugees Alliance, which is supposed to be formed by refugees themselves and led by refugees themselves, so that it is the actual voice of the refugees from the grassroots that is being heard, rather than from voices that are actually trying to say that they're representing the refugees, but when it's not the actual concrete voices of the refugees that is being heard. And that inclusion is quite important, because it will have an inclusion in policy design as well as sustainable integration models, because when the refugees suggest the solution that should work for them, then they will have more impact than rather solutions that are being policy developed and then being pushed on the refugees themselves. And on the final notes is just to be able to say that integration is not just about policies, but it's rather recognizing the humanity and contributions of refugees and the host communities, so that we don't treat refugees as another box to be ticked or another policy to be passed. But these are human beings with dreams. These are human beings with potentials. These are human beings with impact that they can be able to have within the communities that they exist there. And once we look at them in that human lens, then any policy that is developed for refugee integration and their host communities will actually work much more than maybe when we are just looking at it at a policy, another policy, just to be able to solve another solution that has no face to it. So I'd like to thank you all for that. Anybody who needs to get in touch with me, you can be able to get my contacts there. I also want to thank the Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security for having hosted us as coalition members from the 64 Voices. I'd also like to thank the Fields of Peace organization from Oregon, where I'm also a board member. and also do peace work training with them, and also the fledgling and upcoming Kura Kenya Refugees Alliance, which I hope will be an organization that will be able to raise the voices of refugees and be able to get the refugees' voices to be heard. So I hope we are much more now familiar with what the Shirika plan is and the direction where this conversation is going. So asanteni sana, merci beaucoup, shukran, uwechakale chared. So Lucy, the mic is back to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Bior, for that elaborate uh, elaborate presentation, making us understand what the Shirika Plan will do and its impact not just to the refugee community in Kenya, as well as to the host community who are the Kenyan citizens, and why this conversation is so important to both communities, and what pillars, or rather what the Shirika Plan intends to achieve at the end of it all. So I think Pierre has done a very good work. So please let's give him some reactions using the reaction icon. You can clap, love emojis, just to celebrate that detailed presentation that he has made to us. So in the next 1 hour or so, we are going now to have a practical experience on what the Shirika Plan will do to both the host community and the refugee community in Kenya. We are going to hear from a panel of four who are going to give us different perspectives of the Shirika Plan. We are going to hear from an urban refugee, what that means, especially to young people, being that he is a young urban refugee. We are also going to hear what it will really mean to have that movement for refugees who are in Kakuma and Dadaab to now the urban settlements within Kenya. And I think Bior has said has mentioned most of those towns, for example, Eldoret being a host city. We also are going to hear from a gender perspective to understand what are the gender disparities and challenges that the Shirika Plan will bring about. And finally, we are going to hear from a legal mind who's going to bring us a legal perspective to this. So allow me to invite my first panelist, who is Isaac Madeng Machek. Madeng is a South Sudanese refugees community youth leader and staunch feminist and equals rights defender. Madeng has wide experience in youth peace advocacy and has been an UNHCR community representative. He is very passionate about youth agendas, is also a researcher, and tries to reflect this in his numerous writings. As a prolific poet and social critic, he writes to empower his community. Madeng also has a very keen interest in youth political involvement in South Sudanese communities and believes that the empowered youth are the solution to community development. He is an expert in international relations and public policy. So I welcome you, Isaac. Please bring us a perspective on what it means to be a South Sudanese refugee, urban refugee in Kenya, and what the Shirika Plan will mean to these young urban refugee youths in Kenya. Karibu sana, Isaac. And before I get back to you, I will call on Asrat. Just before you get ready with your technical hitch. So Asrat Koricha Tolasa is a Kenyan refugee from Ethiopia who has lived for many years in Kakuma refugee camp, and he's also a community mobilizer. Above that, he's a journalist, he's a teacher, and an environmental activist. He is most proud about the over 10,000 trees in his organization that they have planted in Kakuma homesteads in the Greening Kakuma program. He moved in Nairobi in 2020. He has a bachelor's degree in business management and a background in journalism, and has worked with several humanitarian research organizations in Kenya. He is very passionate about social justice and human rights, and through his exile, he has constantly advocated for refugees and asylum seekers through his writing. So one of the things you have noted from the pillars of the Shirika plan, you have the environmental management factor to it. So Asrat is going to give us a perspective to that, but he's also to going to give us a perspective on what it will really look like to move from Kakuma or Dadaab to an urban settlement such as Nairobi, because he has that experience himself. So karibu sana Asrat, kindly make your presentation. All right, thank you so much. So I think now we are going to hear from the legal mind, and that is Ajak Jok Ajak. So Ajak is known by his peers as the definition of grit, as he almost miraculously rose from his humble beginnings as a dusty little cheeky refugee boy from Kakuma with only a dream of having a decent meal every day to being amongst the first refugees youthful lawyers in Kenya admitted to the bar. Not only did he set professional standards of positive integration, but he also broke barriers as a pioneer. Ajak's impressive toils has culminated in being admitted as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and this is nothing short of uh, an inspiration to other refugees, but also a portrayal of his resilience. He is currently an associate at Aurora and Company Advocates, and he also doubles up as a researcher on refugee issues as well as a writer on the same. He caps all this off with being a staunch refugee rights advocate. So, Karibu Sana Ajak, please give us a legal perspective of what the Shirika plan will mean for both the host community as well as the refugee community, but more importantly, what are the legal basis of achieving the 6 pillars of the Shirika plan? Karibu sana.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucy. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you very much. I won't boast for that kind of description, but thank you so much. I was blushing as you were introducing me. Uh, okay, first thing is that I have not prepared any slides that I will be presenting to all of you. Mine is to just have a general overview and discussion regarding the legal and bureaucratic challenges that the urban refugees usually face and will continue to face as the government of Kenya, along its partners, work to achieve what we now describe as the Shirika plan. And I think when we talk about this, the first thing that you ask yourself is, as an urban refugee, for you to survive in an urban center, if you're not a student, you must be engaged in two things. It's either you're a business person for you to earn a living, or is either you're employed. And that is actually our starting point for all the challenges for refugees who live in the urban centers. And because you have to fend for yourself, and considering the aspirations of the Refugee Act 2021, now that seeks now to make refugees social and economical contributors to the development of Kenya, the law actually before and in the 2021 Refugee Act would allow refugees, of course, to have access to work permit. The challenge, however, was that when you apply for the work permit, possibly it will take you 1 or 2 years before you could get any response. And by that time, if you had a potential employer, I think they would have given up and they would not risk employing you without a work permit. And even though the Refugee Act now is very categorical and clear, that refugees should be allowed to work in Kenya, and to also operate businesses in Kenya, the same challenge is still persistent. And I think my colleague who is researching on the same, I think will present it better. So I am not going to dwell on it so much because ASRAT is doing a research on the refugee access to work permit in urban centers. So I will not discuss much, but the Citizenship and Immigration Act allows refugees to apply for work permit gratis without paying anything. And if you hear gratis, of course, you'll be so excited that this is a great consideration because it considers that refugees are people who are unable to possibly raise the amount of money that is required to pay for work permit. And that's really something to celebrate. But when you now start the procedure, the application and follow up, you give up along the way before you actually obtain it because of some extortion. Personally, I tried to apply when I was admitted as an advocate. And of course, being an advocate in a very busy law firm such as Raro, you'll be interacting with cases that are at the national and international level. And of course, there is no law firm that will actually risk to allow you to work without obtaining a work permit. Otherwise, they'll be in trouble with the government. Of course, they will be slapped with fine. And you yourself also will be putting yourself in problems. And I at the time, my employer had to advise me to actually apply for South Sudan nationality, obtain a South Sudanese national passport, and then apply using the same to make things easier for me, which I indeed followed. And that's how I was able now to work as an advocate in Kenya. So you can just imagine from just a single experience by me, I wonder how many people have tried outside there, especially where you're getting a salary range where possibly you're being offered 100,000, 50,000. I don't think there would be any employer would be willing to wait that long, or a corporate, let's say, a business organization that is thriving or is listed in the stock exchange, in the Nairobi Stock Exchange, waiting for you to obtain the work permit for let's say 6 months and 1 year. That would be such a big challenge, and no company would actually wait for that to happen. So that is one big challenge that we actually have. That's one big challenge that we actually have. Now, going to the business aspects of young professionals and also urban refugees, you will understand that because it was mentioned before by Bureau, uh, nowadays everything has been converted digital in this country. And for you to open a company, it's a simple process that actually takes you 3 days to open a company. But for refugees, it is such a big challenge because the IDs that are issued to refugees, although Section 28 of the Refugee Act 2021 acknowledge that those IDs shall be having the same status as the foreign certificate that is issued to persons who have applied for work permit in the country, you realize that those IDs are not acknowledged in the system. So the system does not acknowledge. So you go to Huduma Center, they're not acknowledged. You try to apply online, they're not acknowledged. So that will be your first hurdle when you try to open your business. So you will have no access to e-citizen account. And that is where you're supposed to open you start your application for registration of the company. So when you try to apply, of course, you won't get it. And the government has not come up with an alternative platform like EFNS for foreign nationals for refugees to also use their IDs, because we understand that refugee ID is a little bit different from a national ID. So you may, in essence, not use a platform like e-citizen, but those who have interacted with the online application system, they know that there is an alternative to e-citizen called EFNS, although it has it's called Electronic Foreign National Portal, and that system, it has limited services, but at least it works for them. But for refugees, there is no such alternative process for them to make their application or to apply for services. And so you see now there is a disconnect between what the law says and what is actually in practice. So those are the challenges that the refugees face outside there. And so if you are in an urban center saying that you had saved your 1 million or 500,000 or 12,000, you want to start a business, and of course, 1 year goes by, probably you will have consumed that 400 to 500,000. And so you go to ground zero and you have no a business that you have established by your own. And so there is actually a need for the institutions to take the law and apply it the way it is in the act. And if you look at Shirika plans, the ambitions are things that are telling you promises for 4 years, another 4 years, 4 years for transition, another 4 years for stabilization. So probably those 8 years, you might actually find yourself we are still in the transition. And then there's another 8 years for resilience, which is now to see it actually come to pass. So I can tell you, we are still very far away. But legally speaking, everything is set. And if refugees were a voting bloc, this would have been a matter that would have been easily addressed at the National Assembly. So now we are at the mercy of institutions that work for refugees and with refugees to actually advocate either through litigation or through advocacy conversations such as the present one, or through memoranda to be submitted to Parliament for consideration. Those are the kind of solutions that we should be looking towards in solving the refugee crisis, so that if the law is in place, the government should be given timeline within which they have to implement. And considering that the government of Kenya does not actually fund refugee initiatives, and most of the funding comes from its partners, such as the UNHCR and other development partners, you'll find that even if funding is available, the manner in which it is used to achieve the refugee objectives, again, somehow delayed, is protracted. And if UNHCR as a leading partner in this program, then it should have a budget of implementation of these basic things, such as access to ID, access to financial products and services, such as simple things such as having an M-Pesa account where you can receive money and send money and be able to manage your business. They're very crucial, but you realize that refugees still face the same challenge that they've had for so many years. There is also inconsistency in laws such as the Refugee Act, acknowledge the refugee ID, and then you go again to the process of crime and anti-mandering Act, Anti-Money Laundering Act, which also does not recognize the refugee ID. Although it was recently amended such that now it has even a provision for a birth certificate. But I bet if you go as a refugee, still Safaricom will send you away and say no. And this digital financial institution, of course, will also send you away, saying that that is an ID that is not recognized. And so there's really need to amend these laws and harmonize them so that they correspond with what is in the Refugee Act. And you know, refugee law, it does not rank superior to other laws. That's one of the major challenges. So you'll find that the process of crime and anti-money laundering law actually ranks above the Refugee Act, and the Act does not provide a clause in it where it says if any provision is inconsistent with this Act, and then this act shall prevail over the other one. And so those are some of the legislative challenges that the refugees are presently facing. So simple things such as having a carabin, these are very difficult things. And I think that's where the partners should start from. And refugee advocacy should not just be on the, I'm sorry to say this, I know this is a good initiative, but it should not just be on Zoom only. It should be taken a little bit seriously, and the funder should be able to file cases in court where the government is held accountable within a specific period of time to do things, just as the government of Kenya and the citizen go to court and then they say the government has to do this within a particular time. And if the government fails to do so, they have to actually account as to why they're unable to do that thing. So that will be it for introduction. I had heard that this session will be a question and answer based. So I don't know whether that still stands or not, but that is just the general overview of the present challenges that the professionals, the business community, and urban refugees face in the cities. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ajak. I think you've brought out very pertinent and such a practical aspect of what it means to be a refugee in the country, more so when it comes to the existing law as well as a law that is meant to be introduced, which is the Shirika Plan, drawing disparity on where the gaps are and how it looks like, as we say in Kenya, qua ground, yeah? Are the provisions made in these policy documents being implemented? For example, access to financial services, documentation such as identity documents, as well as work permits if we are talking about economic development, because we really cannot achieve economic development for the refugee communities if they do not have access to the legal documents. Before I let you go and we move to either our Q&A session or the next panelist, there is an aspect that that Bior brought out about documented and undocumented refugees, which also brings about a legal aspect to it. So when it comes to, because much of what you've presented on has been on a documented refugee. So what is the fate of the legal fate of the undocumented refugees once the Shirika Plan is either implemented or even with the current existing policies, as you've mentioned them?
Yeah, thank you very much, Lucy. And you know, legally speaking, if there's so many reasons why a refugee would be undocumented. Number one, it could be that they don't know where to go for registration. Number one, it could also be that they do not actually want to apply for refugee status. and become refugees. And it could also be because of laxity in the institutions that are entrusted with the procedures of registration. And I've actually a witness to this last thing, especially with the present crisis in the Sudan, Khartoum, where so many Sudanese refugees have come into the country, and some have asylum seeker passes, and so that document, in essence, although it is a document recognizing you as an asylum seeker, cannot help you to gain access to a lot of services. And it's such a big challenge. And the law actually provides for a duration within which, upon being issued with an asylum seeker pass, uh, there are 90 days within which the Department of Refugee Affairs is supposed to consider your application and either reject it, giving reasons, or actually give you a refugee status so that you are able to have an ID. And so essentially your documentation will be complete. So there are instances where, yes, you have entered the country, you have declared yourself that you're an asylum seeker and you've been given an asylum seeker pass. But that is where it stops. Nothing much is happening. And for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, going down 5 years, you still have only that document. And so essentially, you are not documented fully. You don't have all the legal documents, and ID is considered the most important document, especially when it comes to refugee documentation. And especially in urban center, the most important document that a refugee should have in urban center is the refugee ID. Unlike in the camp, you can have your manifest and life can move on, because these are people in a particular community, and this is a shared status, and they don't go anywhere. The services are the same, and probably they receive ration from UNHCR, and so for them it's not really a praising matter, but of course it becomes a praising matter because they need access to services as well. But in an urban setup where you've been given an asylum seeker pass, you are literally dumb and you can't do anything with that document, and it's a document that is not even known by the service institutions in this country. If you go with your asylum seeker pass, rarely will you get a service. Even admission to schools become a problem unless you have to be given some recommendation letters by DRS for them to accept you in certain institutions, especially institutions of higher learning. So these are some of the challenges that I witnessed. And so when it comes to the other aspects, such as being uninterested, I don't think there's no obligation for you to declare yourself as a refugee, as long as you're able to sustain yourself with your status from the country of coming, and you're able to maybe apply for a job, or you're able to start a business as a foreign national without the need to actually obtain a refugee status. That's absolutely fine, and the law does not foresee a situation where it would be an issue if you have not received any documentation. But there's a situation where now you're just here as an illegal immigrant. Maybe the only thing you don't know is where to go. So that is lack of information, and maybe the best thing that can help you there, or what I can say, is maybe creating awareness so that people are aware of the centers at the point of entry, maybe being informed of the offices to visit upon entering the country within a particular time. So, Lucy, that I think that is what I will say, but it is such a big challenge, of course. It is even more challenging when you when you do not have these documents, because if people who have IDs still suffer, I wonder what it is now for asylum seekers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ajak, and even for very openly highlighting some of these challenges, because part of why we intend or we are having this discussion is to also see, because a majority of these urban refugees tend to be young people, and it's more so on seeing how this factor of migration and displacement can also be considered within the youth peace and security framework that the coalition really factors on or works on, but also an awareness among Kenyan citizens, also young people who are the host community, on what challenges refugees face, because they intend to interact with them on a daily basis, whether it's in the business sector, institutions of learning, within the workplace, and also in access of other public services such as health. Yeah. So I don't know whether Isaac is back and whether Monica is back. If they are, kindly just give me a thumbs up, Monica or Isaac. Great. So, as we wait for them, allow me to now open up this discussion to anyone who has a question, a comment, an insight, anything. Probably you want to provide your experience or you want clarity on what it means. We are also going to explore it not just from a youth peace and security aspect of it, but from other factors such as education, health, access to financial services. So in case you want to make your comment, kindly just raise your hand and I'm going to pick up on you. You can also type out your comment on the uh comment section and I will pick up on you. All right, I can see a thumbs up from Isaac. Isaac, if you're ready, um kindly go ahead and make your presentation before we go to the Q&A. Isaac?
Uh, Thank you so much, Lucy. I'll not be able maybe to use my video. Um, I don't know if you can hear me.
Perfectly well, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm a little bit unprepared uh, because I was not following up with the bureau yesterday as to the time that we're going to, do this Zoom, as I was a bit busy also with some community stuff. And then last night, I had to take my uncle's wife to the hospital to deliver. She delivered very well, and we thank God for that. So I came home very late. I went to bed. Actually, he was the one to remind me, actually, this morning at 10 that the Zoom is on. So I had to wake up and come here. In as much as most of the things have been said, by the past speakers. And I first want to appreciate those who brought up this initiative because, without the discussions like this, I don't think we'll be able to know some of the challenges that, we are going through. And as a youth leader, a community leader, at this level, I've experienced firsthand some of the challenges that are affecting these refugees. Uh, and some of them have been said by Bill, but I'll be able to not be so much elaborative like him, but I'll just be able to touch on some of the things that are affecting refugees, especially the youth. One of them being redundancy that is caused by uh, not doing something. Most of the youth, the refugees that are here, have actually resorted to drugs and other crimes simply because they've not been engaged, things to do with school, other things to do with sports, and they resorted to doing nasty things, you know. And I also see that as a lack of good leadership from those that are responsible for refugees here. Another thing that I'll be able to say and it's the business aspect of it, which the past speakers, Birs and Ajagjo, have said is, people go through a lot when you're about to set up a little bit of a business that you can use to sustain yourself. And you'll find yourself being frustrated so much, going from one place to the other, trying to get a work permit. And you'll even give up in the process because you're not able to find it. And what does that do? It's only affect people more because you'll not be able to have, even a source of income, something that can sustain you as time passes by. So it's a big challenge, and if Sherka Plan is really working, another maybe organization are really trying to help refugees, they should look, on this and should be able to address it, soon enough. Another things that I possibly see is also one of the things that is affecting refugees. Um, is this issue of applying for an ID, and then it takes you 6 to 7 months without getting it. You'll not be able to assess some of the things that you want to assess. Like, let's take, for example, those that reside in Eldoret. You go to the office and say that I want an ID, and you are told, to wait for a period that is even up to a year. So I don't know why that is so. This is supposed to be simple. You just go and give out your details and you're given your ID. But that has not been the case. People have to go through a lot to get it. Other times we are told that the system is down. I don't know which system is that and why it's so faulty. And you're compelled to come back and stay at home, without doing anything else. Um, Another aspect that I would like to talk about is that urban refugees are actually going through is, you find there are some scholarships that would come out, and if an urban refugee wants to apply, you are told to go to Kakuma, and maybe you've never gone to Kakuma to go and apply from there. So I'm really wondering whether there are no scholarship designed or mainly made for urban refugees in towns, especially in Nakuru, Nairobi, Eldoret, Kakamega, Kitale, to the other part of Western Kenya. So I really do not know why that is the case, and it's one of the things that need to be looked at. So these are some of the few highlights that I have. I would have prepared much better if I had more time, and maybe if I was not engaged like I was. So thank you so much, and I'll also be able to listen from maybe other speakers because I know they will also have points to add on this. Thank you so much. I'll 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 give the room to you, maybe to continue.
All right. Thank you so much, Isaac, for sharing that with us. It's okay. Your presentation was actually very helpful because you bring out a very personal aspect on what it means to be a young urban refugee in Kenya. And also in the light of that, congratulations to the new addition in your family. Yeah. So I liked that you brought out the issue of education because we have a researcher in the room, and I'm going to invite Kennedy Monari to give us his presentation. So Kennedy is an education in emergencies specialist, a teacher, and an early career researcher in the political economy of education in fragile, violent, and conflict contexts. He has over 6 years of experience in this field. He has a Master's of Education in Emergencies from the University of Nairobi. Kennedy has significantly impacted the field by designing and implementing successful programs for children affected by conflict and natural disasters and teaching at the secondary school level in the marginalized parts of Kenya. He's also a Rotary Peace Fellow, alumni of Makerere University Rotary Peace Center, where he conducted numerous field visits to post-conflict communities in Rwanda, in northern and western Uganda. He's also recognized for his unwavering dedication and passion for peace and conflict transformation, particularly in the context of education in emergencies. Additionally, he has successfully implemented a social change initiative focusing on visual artistic expression for social cohesion between urban refugees and the host community here in Nairobi, Kenya. So I think, Isaac, and I hope that some of the questions you have asked, we will have Kennedy answering them. But more importantly, one of the pillars of the Shirika plan is skills development, and we hope that Kennedy is going to be able to provide that aspect in this discussion. So Isaac, Kennedy, karibu sana, and please make your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. My name is Kennedy Monari. I'm an education emergency specialist. And today I'm glad to present the findings of my research on refugee education, particularly urban refugee pupils in Nairobi. I've also conducted similar research in other contexts in Uganda and also in Ethiopia, focusing also on a refugee in refugee settlements and refugee in urban context. So I think the first presenters gave the contextual background of urban refugees, so I may not dwell so much on that. I'm going to just share with you the key findings of my study. So the key findings, this study was conducted, the target population was 10 schools in Nairobi with a significant number of refugee students, predominantly in Eastleigh, in Umoja, let me say in Embakasi East, Embakasi West, and Embakasi South, and some parts of schools in Kawangware that host a significant number of refugee pupils. So the key findings highlight that the teacher training is inadequate for addressing the needs of refugee children who often face challenges in adapting to a new curriculum, a language of instruction, and classroom expectation. Refugee children struggle with a curriculum that differ significantly from those in their home countries, and teachers require specialized training to manage multicultural classroom and psychosocial needs of our traumatized learners. So another thing was language barriers is a very critical issue, as refugee pupils often lack proficiency in the host country language of instruction. And in this context, in Kenya, we're using English and Kiswahili as a language of instruction. And this greatly limits the ability of a refugee to comprehend lessons, leading to frustration, poor performance, and high dropout rates. So addressing these gaps through comprehensive teacher training, language support programs, and targeted curriculum development is essential for promoting integration of urban refugees in education on the mainstream education system. Several initiatives by government and non-governmental organizations aim to support the integration of urban refugee children in education. One of the key initiatives the government, through the Ministry of Education, has implemented education for all policy to ensure universal access to basic education. In collaboration with the NGOs like UNHCR, UNICEF, the government has developed programs that support refugee inclusive schools in urban areas. And efforts include providing teaching resources tailored to diverse learners, training teachers in psychosocial support and multicultural competence, and integrating refugees into national curriculum. However, relying on the in-service training of teachers to manage refugee children often do not address the social cultural aspect that refugee brings into classroom, and this is not does not really prepare teacher adequately to handle refugee children. So NGOs have also established community learning centers and remedial programs to bridge gaps in education. And I think I visited one of the NGO called Savia. Yes, the name is Savium. That they have remedial programs that provide language support to the refugee students. Also, they have education hubs in Nairobi and part in Kitengela in Kajiado County. So they have these remedial programs that are trying to bridge gaps in education for children who have missed years of schooling. And we also have those schools that provide accelerated learning program for all the refugees or refugees who have been out of school for a longer period. Additional organizations such as Jesuit Refugee Service and Window International Kenya work closely with schools to sponsor refugee children, provide scholarship, and distribute school supply to reduce the financial barriers. So another constraint is the financial constraint, which remain a significant barrier to education for urban refugee children. Despite Kenya's free primary education policy, hidden costs such as school uniform, transportation, and learning material creates obstacles for many refugee families, particularly those facing poverty. Many children are forced to forego schooling to contribute to family income or care for siblings. Many children are forced to, the financial support mechanism include the subsidized education materials, uniform, and transportation. And oftentimes these are just provided by non-governmental organizations and foundations and other well-wishers. So the government's efforts in doing this, it's very minimal. So this has greatly elevated these burdens. Learning from the global examples such as Turkey, where they have a cash-based assistance program to disadvantaged families, the Kenya government and its partners should also explore the similar intervention to improve enrollment retention rates among the refugee learners. Finally, government policy on refugee education also influence integration. Kenya, we have what we call the encampment policy, which restricts refugees to designated camps, which creates a protection and assistance gap for those refugees migrating in urban areas. So without clear administrative framework, urban refugees often face exclusion from formal education system. So the study recommended an inclusive policy framework to ensure urban refugee children enjoy same rights as their local partners. So, and also recommended the collaboration between the Kenyan government, international partner, humanitarian agency to address policy gaps, promote inclusive education, and achieve education for all. And one of the limitations for this study, when I was collecting data, most of the refugee children, they were very afraid of participating in the study. And what I discovered, one of the reasons was that they thought of that they will be victimized because many of them, maybe their parents migrated to urban centers illegally. So they have no the legal permit to live in urban setting as a result of encampment policy. So many of them were, I think they did not express any desire to participate in the study. But these were mitigated through using the teachers, and confidence was built, and most of them also took part in this. Yeah, so that is a very short presentation. I think it has been an impromptu, so I didn't prepare much for this, but that is the little finding of my study. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you to Kennedy even for taking time to present with an impromptu notice. I think you've brought out a very important aspect to the Shurika plan, because the Shurika plan has a pillar on skills development, and part of that skill development is education. However, you've brought out an aspect on whether, even as Kenya as a host country gears towards a reintegration of refugees reintegration of refugees from camps to settlements, whether the existing education system in Kenya is truly friendly for refugees, and also that aspect of them coming from a conflict situation, as well as other identity factors that are unique to them as opposed to the general population of the Kenyan students. Yeah, so that is a very important aspect, and I think questions we should be able to ask ourselves. Kennedy, we are going to link you up with Bior so that we can see how you can present your findings to the ongoing consultations on the Shurika plan, because I think they are very important aspects that should be incorporated and well thought out in the final Shurika plan document. Yeah. So allow me now to finally open up the session to Q&As. You can just raise your hand if you want to make a contribution. But before I get someone to do that, allow me to read some of the comments in the comment section. We have Salim Dulo, who says the problem that we have in Kenya is that citizens think that the refugees will be used like a vote machine, and if the process will not be successful, then so many questions will arise. And I think that's a very important aspect of um, what is the perception of the host communities towards the refugees. Yeah. And one of them, Salim has pointed out, is the vote aspect of it. Are they going to be given a voting right, just like a Kenyan citizen? So I'm going to give that question to Ajak because I think it has a legal aspect to it. Another comment is by Ellie, who says, why Kenyan government accepts to host refugees that they cannot assist? It's only in Kenya where refugees are denied the right to communication and economic inclusion, as well as other rights, because the legal documents uh, such as the alien card can't even open an M-Pesa line for business or day-to-day transactions. So if a refugee card cannot open a telecommunications line, then a refugee has no right to communication. The government needs to put us into consideration to help refugees get access to such services, because it's the way for a meaningful integration. Thank you so much, Ellie, for that. And I think also that's something else Jack brought out in the aspect of, it's one thing to have policies on refugees and integration of refugees, but it is another thing to actually implement and actualize them. And I think you are confirming to what he had said, that even with these identity documents, such as an alien card or the refugee card, you cannot be able to access just basic services such as opening a financial, for example, a bank account or registration of a telecommunication uh, documentation, such as M-Pesa. So thank you for that. We have Kadafirwa who asks, what impact does World Beyond War have in influencing Kenyan government policies? Additionally, does this organization advocate exclusively for urban refugees in Kenya? So World Beyond War is actually our partner in this webinar, and I hope we have a representative on that we will be able to give an answer to that. So anyone with a question or a comment, kindly raise your hand and then I'm going to be in a position to pick on you.
Thank you, Lucy. I think Jack can respond to the legal questions. Then later on, I'll come in to answer the question on WorldBeyondWar.
All right. Jack, please, you may have the floor.
Apologies, Lucy. I did not get the question correctly. Hello? Hello, Lucy?
Yes, sorry.
Sorry,
So
I did not get the
the
question correctly.
all right. So the question to you is a comment by Salim who says the problem that we have in Kenya is that citizens think the refugees will be used like a vote machine. And if the process will not be successful, then so many questions will rise. So that is just a perception of of citizens in the host community, what they think about. So probably elaborate upon implementation of the Shirika plan, what rights will the integrated refugees have in the host community, and what will that look like with their relationship with the host community?
Okay, thank you very much. And I think Salim, it is a very good question, and it is one of the things that people have been advocating the world over, whether the refugees should be granted some political rights in their host countries, and it's something that is yet to actually gain international recognition, even in the UK and the US. So, and Björn had actually mentioned, I don't know if I remember correctly, that whether refugee representation is one of the things that still remain outstanding, even in the grand plan that we now call the Shirika plan, because refugee voices will still only be heard through the already existing channels, but not through some political channel. And so, literally, it is just a perception, as Lucy has intimated. It is not something that the host community should fear. That refugees will, or maybe now host certain rights through political process, certain rights of the local. And apart from things such as sharing of resources within the local community and maybe employment opportunities, the political rights of the locals are really not interfered with. And this challenge comes because of a lack of public engagement and awareness among the host communities. Because if host communities know that the rights that are not available to refugees and the rights that are available to refugees, there will be no such misconception. And even today, some people think that just being in Nairobi and you're able to afford a meal for yourself as a refugee. Some people think that the government of Kenya donates money to refugees, and some people feel like that they are suffering because the government of Kenya is trained by donating some money to the refugees, which is absolutely also another perception, such as that one. So this one is a matter of involving the local community in refugee affairs so that there is awareness as to the rights that are available to refugees, and also how, and the moment they're able to understand this thing, they can be in a position to best protect the interests of the refugees as well. And even if representation of refugees is something to go by through political processes, and then will it be considered as a constituency on itself, or how will it be considered, and so I think. So these are rights that are not available to refugees. What has happened in the Western world is that their voices are heard from the, and then now they are implemented through parliamentary processes, but not, of course, through voting. That is what happened. And that is also what the Shrika plans now intends to do, making sure that the government is in the forefront of fighting for refugee rights, as it does also for citizens' rights. But of course, not through some political machination by the refugees themselves, because it is seen that sometimes it can create conflict. And now you pose a threat to a refugee when there is a conflict between the local community and the refugees themselves. So those are some of the fears in policy making that people do not wish to actually advance. Uh, but so in essence, it's not really a matter. It's not. There's no legal space for it. It is something that is up for dialogue and for discussion, and whether you think it is a good idea, what are the advantages and the disadvantages. I think that's how I can answer. I think if someone else who is more informed or has research on this political process can maybe add their comment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Richie. And before Bior comes in to answer the next question, the beauty about this conversation is that we have policymakers in the room. So allow me to invite Richie Olaka. Richie, kindly come in and introduce yourself and the work you are doing at the Department for Refugees, as well as you tackle the two questions that have a legal and policy aspect to it. Karibu.
Thank you so much, Lucy. I'm happy to engage once again. The last time I engaged on this forum with Oscar and the rest of the team, I worked for a different department, but I now work with the Department of Refugee Services here in Kenya. So in terms of, there's that debate on whether we are taking these rights from ECOSOC, economic and social rights, the Chapter 4 rights, to now political rights. But our policies on citizenship are clear. I mean, it's a clear path that only citizens enjoy political rights. These are rights to vote and other political rights, rights to form a political party and things like that. So really, as it were, refugees are precluded from that. However, refugees enjoy other human rights, other social and economic rights, just as Bior and Ajak and all of the other speakers who came before explained. For example, they have a right to economic participation, they have a right to education, have a right to healthcare, and so many other social and economic rights. And that is the policy of the department. Is it a perfect space? Certainly not. Are there so many glaring gaps? For example, what I picked through the discussion was the issue of access to e-citizen, for example. The way e-citizen is configured is such that the ID number needs 8 digits, and you find that the refugee card that we had lesser digits. So as it were, a refugee can just access it. But you may want to know that in the new ID, if you have anyone registering for a new ID or an existing refugee, for example, if the ID expires, because it does expire after 5 years and then they renew it, the new one has 8 digits, and that would make it easier. We have a lot of intervention. Just recently, 2 weeks ago, we launched what we call the Haba. And Haba Haba is an initiative by NSSF where refugees can now save. They can save for old age, for retirement, and things like that. In terms of work permits, what are we doing? We are talking to our sister department, because work permits are issued by the Department of Immigration. And as it were, the process can be really long and tedious, but that's slowly changing. It's slowly changing. Do we again operate in a perfect environment? Certainly not even for host communities. I mean, urban refugees, for example, would live in just the, for example, last week I was out on a community engagement with a refugee group in Kawangware, and the kind of life that they're living, what they can afford, is, I mean, the economic conditions are so similar to host communities where they live. So is it a perfect world? No, but a strides being made for sure. And government through the Shirika plan, which will be launched very soon. However, actions are still on way. It's still a document. There's a lot of consultation in terms of how do we just improve the refugee experience. Most importantly, because refugees are people just like us, and other than that, you'll find that a lot of refugees really come from our region. You find most of them are Somalis, and they're Somalis just like Kenyan Somalis. South Sudanese, there are a lot of ties between Kenya and South Sudan, between Kenya and Sudan, between Kenya and the Congo, for example, between Kenya and Burundi, and Kenya and Rwanda, which are our predominant, source nations for refugees. So these are brothers and sisters, and there's a lot that government and the department is doing just to ensure that we give them a good experience. Maybe I didn't want to come in with that because mine was basically to listen. However, maybe for Ajak, I just wanted to know this process of what was the experience. Would you mind to share with us your experience in terms of transitioning from being a refugee to now reclaiming your South Sudanese status? Maybe what was the process like, and would you love to share? And also maybe for Bior, I listened to your conversation and your presentation. You mean it was great. I like your understanding of the Shirika plan. Maybe just on the numbers, for example, what are the numbers of refugees? You're using data for 2002 that has since morphed. For example, in Nairobi, we have around 100,000, and I'll get the exact figure, but almost of 100,000 urban refugees. And also in camps, the total number of refugees, 840 something thousand. I'll again confirm the actual numbers of refugees, but then the numbers are way higher just at the moment. So maybe those are my questions to Bior and Ajak, but just to give you a reassurance that the department and all our partners, UNHCR and all the other partners, are doing the best we can to ensure a good refugee experience. Asante.
All right. Thank you so much, Richie, for even taking that time to bring that policymakers aspect to it. And there's also a similar question, I think, to you from Anthero, who says, he says, thanks for the presentation. And he says, I would like to understand why the 206 Refugee Act is not fully implemented in Kenya, and which structures are better are better positioned to push for policy reforms and advocate for improved legal frameworks that promote long-term refugee integration. And I think it's a question of coordination that you've partly answered by saying that the Department for Refugees does not have the sole work, for example, of offering work permits and such provisions that the Shirika Plan and even prior policies such as the 206 Refugee Act are advocating for. And therefore, it becomes an aspect of coordinating with other relevant either ministries or state departments. Yeah. So Andero asks, what is the long-term legal framework for integration on that? Probably before I let you go, you can answer that.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if I got my network hitches here and there. However, in terms of the 2006 refugees, what happens is after some time there is need. For example, that one started the 2006 Act, established the Refugee Affairs Secretariat. We now have a department. And really, if you look at the two acts, the 2006 and the current one, we are using the 2001, it's an improvement. And that's why even the Shield Plan, which we are trying to move from an encampment policy to integrated settlements, that's under the Shield Plan. It's also captured in the 2021 Refugee Act. So we are really moving from from encampment to integrated cells. I hope I got it right. But then I've also seen on the chat the question of queer refugees. I mean, it's very contentious. These are questions that's just as contentious within refugee communities as it's contentious within nationals. For example, that debate, do we legalize LGBTQI, and it's a whole debate. And this shows us that the debates that pertain in citizen spaces, in spaces of nationals, are the same debates pertaining in refugee spaces. So how I'd answer it is the same policy and legal framework that pertains for citizens, irrespective of sexual orientation, irrespective of their gender, same policy that pertains to refugees. So to the extent that, for example, men cannot marry men within our legal framework, the same extent to which, for example, refugees are only allowed to marry heterosexually within the legal framework that pertains both the legal and policy framework. However, it's very important to note that the persecutions that someone will be running away for them to be determined to be a refugee. For example, if someone, let me put it this way, if someone is queer and they're running away because of their political ideology, we would still give them status based on their political ideology and not their sexual orientation. So there are persecutions that enable one. We have a process called the RSD, Refugee Status Determination. So we look at why is this person wanting to be an asylum seeker? Why is this asylum seeker wanting to gain refugee status? And we don't look at their sexual orientation. We look at the laid points. Why is this person fleeing whichever form of persecution? I want to just conclude everything that I give the floor to the speaker so that I don't really come back again. But that is it in a nutshell. In terms of sustainability, I've seen a question on sustainability. The Shirika plan is actually going to be a sustainable way. It's going to be a way where you have refugees, just like locals, are going to integrate. And we are doing a lot of advocacy, especially with financial institutions, with banks, with telling them today with the refugee card, you can actually open an account. You may need, in some instances, a comfort letter from the department, which we readily avail. I know that has some logistical hitches because the person has to leave whatever vocations they're in and come to the office. But whenever they present themselves, we try and give them those letters in the most efficient and effective manner. Is there room for development? Certainly, yes. But it's a whole conversation we can keep going. And thank you so much. I also saw a Rotary Peace Fellow like myself who presented Asate. I hope that answers.
All right. Thank you so much, Richie, for those insights, and also to Edward. We were meant also to have Monica, who was going to bring out that aspect of gender and identity factor to the conversation. However, she sent her apologies. But next time, because we intend that this will not be the last conversation we are having on this, we will make sure that that gender and identity factor is brought out. But Richie has done a really good job in actually bringing that aspect of whether issuing of asylum and refugee status has that discriminatory factor of the gender and identity consideration to it. So thank you so much, Richie, for standing there. So Bior, you're going to go next to answer the comments and questions that Ellie had. And after you, I want to put someone on spot as I also recognize her presence, and that is one of our partners in this conversation, who is Habiba from the World Beyond War in Tunisia. So after Bior, you're going to answer the question by Kadafirwa, who asked, what impact does World Beyond War have in influencing Kenyan government policies? Additionally, does this organization advocate exclusively for urban refugees in Kenya? All right, Bior karibu sana. Please go ahead.
Asante sana, Lucy. Thank you. And thank you to the other speakers. And also thank you to Richie Olaka for stepping up and being brave, because we usually find that in such spaces, it's quite difficult for policy implementers or those who work closely with policy implementers to be able to take the mic and speak honestly and candidly to individuals who are actually being affected by the policies. And before I move on to Kadafirwa's question, I'll be able to also answer the question that Richie had posed in terms of the data that I use. And yes, it is true, the data I used is still backdated. It's not the current data. It's the one that was submitted in 2002. So it's still not updated to the current numbers of refugees that are there, because of course the numbers have increased. They are not the 2002 figures that were there, because we also have influx from other new refugees who have actually come in, and those ones have actually added. And that also speaks to the dire situation in terms of if that was the numbers that we had in 2012, we still saw them as scary numbers, then the current numbers that Richie has actually mentioned in the thousands should also give us a point to worry. And we see that this is the situation that the refugees are in, and these are the numbers of people that we currently have suffering within the borders of Kenya. Then we see that this conversation is quite urgent, and this conversation needs to be fast-tracked, so that these populations and these people that we now know exist among the Kenyan communities can be able to live in dignity and live in harmony with the host communities. And now to answer Gaddafi's question, and I think also the other World Beyond War representative from Tunisia will be able to mention, is that World Beyond War also has a chapter here in Kenya. It's more of like a collaboration between advocacy groups that have an intention or that work in peace building efforts, or that have objectives in peace building generally. So they usually come together as collaborators with the main objective of stopping wars within countries, or stopping the global war machinery. That is their main objective, to make sure that there's no longer war within the world that we live in, and that communities can be able to live peacefully without the necessity of them engaging in war. So that is their main objective as World Beyond War. In terms of the Kenya chapter having any direct policies or engagement with the government of Kenya, I might not be in a position to be able to answer that, but I do know that the Kenya World Beyond War chapter has initiatives that they try to engage with, and policies that they try to influence through their advocacy channels, and also through other avenues where they can be able to bring the voice of those who are affected by conflicts and those who are affected by war. So that's technically what the World Beyond War organization does. And that's how we are collaborating with them as our organizers, as the Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, and also as the 64 Voices organization, and also on my personal capacity as an alumni of World Beyond War, and also as an individual who has participated in some of the activities that they usually do, like peace training and also youth empowerment initiatives. So I'll also like to add to Richie as a policy maker, so that they'll be able now to fully understand that as much as there are a lot of gaps that are there, yes, the Kenya government is actually supposed to be commended for the great work that they have done. As much as Brother Jack mentioned that the Kenya government does not directly have any funding for the refugee programs that are in place, but they also have the in-kind hosting of refugees, in that they've given the space, they've given the protection to the refugees, as much as there's not direct financial input that the Kenya government gives directly to the refugees. And I would also like to mention the point that was raised earlier by a speaker, that Kenya can try a policy that had been tried, I think, in Turkey, where refugees or families are given assistance. And I would be able to say that when we look at the context of Kenya and the perception that refugees are being given assistance, or that the assumption that refugee families are being given direct cash or money from somewhere else, then in terms of if that policy comes, it will actually be able to bring a kind of like a divide between the host communities, because already now there's that suspicion that the refugees are being supported monetarily by either the government or other agencies, which is not the case. But if that money is kind of like injected into the overall national policy, where maybe such as the Inua Jamii programs, and then now the refugees themselves are directly included within the host communities, then I think that that benefit will be of much more importance, because it will also help the host communities as well as helping the refugees, rather than just targeting the refugee communities and then leaving away the host communities. And I think that is the issues that we have seen in places like Kakuma, where even the host communities tend to be suspicious of refugees and suspecting that refugees have better living standards than them, the actual citizens. And that is usually one of the causes of intercommunal conflict, where you find that the host communities tend to sometimes kind of like suspiciously view the refugees and attacking the refugees at some points, where we have seen that refugees communities have been attacked by some rogue host community members on that policy of suspicion that the refugees are being treated way much more better than they are, and that the refugees are living well than the host communities who are actually citizens. And I think the only way, because we cannot shy away from this discussion, is to make sure that regardless of what policy is brought, if you do not fully integrate, because the policy of integrating an individual is to be able to make them a part of that community. You cannot say that when you're giving somebody unemployment, but you haven't given them citizenship, because when you give somebody citizenship, that is where the basis of full integration comes from. Because regardless of how you exist within that area, but you are not given the same rights, the same human right, the same political rights, or the same social rights, which are usually garnered to you by having a citizenship or something close to a citizenship, then you still don't have, you are not integrated. And that's the main definition of integration. And I think this is where we usually have this disconnect from the agencies that are trying to handle refugee integration in Kenya, because they tend to forget the fine definition of what integration is, because you are only integrated when you become fully a permanent member of that community. And the only way you become as such is for you to be recognized with the same rights as a citizen of that place. Then you will be considered to be fully integrated. But just the other integration, either the economical inclusion, those are social inclusions. Those are not integration, because integrations come with the definition of you becoming a full member of that community. You are given citizenship, and you are given equal rights as to the rights that a citizen can be able to enjoy and be able to have, be it political rights for you to express yourself. Because if you cannot politically express yourself, and you are considered to be integrated, and we do know that most of the policies are influenced on political grounds, then that does not make sense for you to be able to consider that individual being integrated, when the political decisions are being made on their behalf by somebody else, or the policies that directly affect their social well-being or economic well-being, which are usually politically sometimes driven or politically influenced, because there's as much as advocates can be able to reach. If those people are not integrated in such a way that they can have a political weight, or maybe a political muscle in one sense or another, then you cannot be talking of them being fully integrated. They're still there. And that's what I mentioned in terms of Shirika Plan not being used as a box ticking exercise, in terms of making a policy where it will be considered the refugees have been integrated, when it will just be a facade or kind of like an illusion that they're integrated. But in real sense, on the background, they're actually not integrated. And that's why we still see that the Refugee Act is in existence, but it is not fully implemented, because there's no political will for it to be implemented. And you find that the political will and the implementation of it, there's quite a huge division from there. And that's why we see these challenges that we have with the refugee IDs not being recognized from here and there, and also these application issues, and also the issues of full recognition of refugees, and the suspicion that comes from the social integration and all that. So I think the discussion is timely. And it's for us to be able to move away from not accepting refugees being fully integrated by them being given either citizenship. And I think it's also something that can be able to positively change the Kenyan social dynamics, and also the Kenyan social infrastructure, because when you have these refugees integrated in Kenya, like our brother said, Richie, These are individuals coming from diverse countries. And that will be like having citizens of Kenya that are coming from diverse cosmopolitan regions, which will be able to make Kenya a much more colorful country compared to even how South Africa calls itself the rainbow nation. Then I think Kenya will politically be the exact definition of a rainbow nation, because when you have individuals who have citizenship coming from all over the region, then that's the definition of what a rainbow nation is. And if they live cohesively together, well integrated, and living as one harmonious community, then that actually builds the tolerance of that community in terms of them being able to contribute more to the global sphere. So thank you, Lucy, and I hope I'd answered those questions that have been kept. And I'll open the mic to Brother Jack Jock to respond to the other questions that he was asked in terms of him explaining his lived experiences and how he decided to change to revert back to the South Sudanese citizenship, because that is known as refalling. When you move back to your original citizenship and you no longer now become a refugee, then you have refalled or you have moved back to your other citizenship so that you can be able to get a work permit. So thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Chris. So Brother Jack, you can have the mic.
Yes, thank you, Bior. Thank you so much for those insights. Bior, you can go ahead and answer Richie's question, and then we'll have Habiba.
Okay, thank you, Lucy and Richie and Bior. The challenges that actually made me to transition from my refugee status and to acquire the citizenship of my country and thereafter apply for work permit as a South Sudanese national. Like I said before, you know, all my life I came to Kakuma refugee camp in around 19 December, I think around December of 1999. And I was thereafter registered as a refugee. So all my life, I've lived majorly in the refugee camp in Kakuma. And but God was fortunate enough. We tried our best with the little opportunities that are available in Kakuma, and of course, we were able to get scholarships that sponsored me to high school and thereafter to university through the Wilder International Trust and Duffy Scholarship. And then I proceeded to Kenya School of Law. So all the while when I used to work in between, I work in Kakuma as a teacher. And of course, there was no requirement for work permit. I also worked with the Refugee Consortium of Kenya, Kakuma office. Before then, there was no requirement for work permit. But now, after completing my Kenya School of Law and becoming an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and being retained as an advocate at Oraro and Company Advocate, I was, of course, required to apply for a work permit. And I tried to apply under Class M, refugee work permit, which, of course, between 2021, an application that I made in 2021, by the time I was being admitted in 2022, because I got my offer for employment at Oraro in 2021. And for almost a year, in fact, for a year, from September 2021 to August 2021, I did not have the refugee work permit, Class M. And so now when I was an advocate, I was now required to travel here and there to attend court, to travel to places like Mombasa, Eldoret, representing clients. So now for Aro, of course, they could not take that risk to actually allow me to work as an advocate without work permit. And so they said that this application is protracted. So you might have to choose between this employment or other alternatives that is going to work for you. And so we discussed the alternatives that were available. And of course, among them was the fact that It would even give you greater freedom if you regain the citizenship of your country and you apply for Class D work permit. And that way you'll be able to travel outside the country easily and come back, so that if there are conferences to be attended, the firm will be in a position to send you there without any problem. Considering that also even obtaining a conventional travel document for you to travel outside the country also is a procedure in itself. And you see, employers, they do not like this kind of procedures where you have to be in and out of office every time trying to look for these things. So the best thing that we came up with my employer was that it is better now for me to just apply and hope that it will be very fast. And so I did. So I applied through the South Sudan embassy in Kenya, and my nationality certificate was processed, and my passport was processed, and upon making the application, within 2 weeks, I was able to get my work permit. Although now I had to pay 210,000 as the processing fee, 10,000 as the processing fee, and 12,000 as the issuance fee. You also note that recently the same was increased from 210,000 to 520,000 for foreign nationals who are employed under Class D in Kenya. So that is basically the transition. But the good thing is you're able to get it very fast because you're paying for it. So the government process very fast what is being paid for, and they do not want to process what is not being paid for. So basically, that's what I realized, because I had obtained all the documents from Department of Refugee Service at the time in 2021. So I had gotten the recommendation letter, had all the documents ready, contract of employment, everything. But of course, still, my application could not be processed in due course. And that's what now forced my hand to, okay, it's not forced my hand, but it's always an available option that if your circumstances have changed and you see now employment might change your life, if you are unable to go back to your country, then it will be good also to just use the available offices such as the embassy to achieve your objective. So basically, that's what I did. For some of my friends who had the same challenges, they actually went back to South Sudan, and that is it. Some even don't have to go through the process of repatriation. You just go back home, and that's it. So I think that answers your question, Richie. Unless if there is some part that I've left out, maybe you can let me know that I give a quick rejoinder. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ajak, for sharing your experience. I'm sure there are a lot of us here who are understanding not just the role that the host community plays, but as well as the relations within the refugee community itself. So thank you so much for sharing your story. So I'm going to call on Habiba. Habiba, please, if you can hear me, please go ahead.
Yes,
and
good
tell us.
morning.
All right.
Good morning from Tunisia.
All right. Good afternoon from Kenya.
It's 10 a.m. in Tunisia, so it's still morning.
All right. Please go ahead.
I think I had nothing to add. I would like to thank all the interview for for this communication. And I would like to note that in Tunisia, this social aspect of refugees is a new situation for us since the revolution in 2010. And I subscribe to this Zoom to understand, to compare. I'm Rotarian, and in Rotary we are dealing with peace, and we are peacemaker. So I'm here to discover experience, to have this experience of other country, and to try to find some solution with our non-government association for this refugee battle in Tunisia, because the problem is here, the situation is a little bit difficult, and non-government association we haven't tools to deal with this. Donc we are learning with refugees, and we are trying to compare and to find solution for them. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, and pass our regards to the entire community of World Beyond War. And thank you so much for even being part of the partners in this webinar and standing in solidarity with the refugees in Kenya. We're also very much appreciative that the forum is
Thank you so much.
all right, that the forum also brings that aspect of exchange of knowledge. And yeah, I hope you've learned something from their experience in Kenya. Thank you. So I am going to invite my panelists to give their closing remarks, and I'm going to start with Kennedy Monari. And Kennedy, as you give your closing remarks, there's a comment by Violet, who says, on the side of education, on my own view, we have a lot to be done within my county. And I think she had mentioned her county is Vihiga, where we have less class materials and lack of education. So I think her question ties to the fact that if there are some counties in Kenya who are already experiencing challenges in basic education resources, such as classrooms, as well as learning materials, how then are they going to be able to bring out that unique aspect of hosting refugee students who have a very unique experience and need more attention and a very unique aspect to the curriculum? So as you give your closing remarks, Kennedy, kindly also address that a comment by Violet. Karibu sana, Kennedy.
Okay, thank you so much, Lucy. So regarding the question, I don't know whether I got the question right. Now, the only problem that we're having in Kenya, but not only Kenya alone, but the refugee hosting countries regarding education is we tend to have good policy. However, when it comes to the implementation of this policy, that's when the challenges now begin. So theoretically, refugees have access to education, but in practice, there are a number of barriers which hinders refugees to enjoy the right to education as nationals. So I think, most of the government hosting the hosting countries, refugee hosting country government do not prioritize refugee education. So they've largely left these to the international organization and non-governmental organization to come in. So in terms of resource mobilization by the national government to fund refugee education at all levels, particularly higher education for refugees, is greatly challenged. And even the international organization and international donors, they only prioritize primary education and tend to overlook secondary education and the tertiary education for the refugees. So that's the greatest challenge. Also, one of the presenters also talked about the misconception of refugees. And this is the misconception really influence the government policy that less welcoming to refugees, and also host community misconception about the refugees, And somebody gave a comment on if the international, international organization provide funding that are tailored to support refugee, it will cause a tension between the host community and the refugee communities. Which are these? These are the concepts. These are the tension that are the result of the misconception. And one of our projects that implemented using a visual artistic expression for social cohesion between urban refugee and host community. It was the project, this initiative meant to do away with this, to get rid of this misconception. Mostly the host community has that refugees get money from United Nations, so they have a lot of money and ABCD. So all these misconceptions are there, and they are greatly affecting the relationship between the host communities and the refugee communities. I think in conclusion, so the Kenyan government approach to refugee camps is influenced by a mix of security concern, resource limitation, international pressures. Although there is international support, including financial assistance for maintaining refugee camps, Kenyan stance has been to push for solutions that align more with the national interests, such as repatriation of refugee policy and many more. So my conclusion is we need to come up with a policy or to implement. Yes, we have policy, but we need to implement this policy to fully support refugee integrations and also to do away with the misconception from the host communities that further complicate relationship between the refugee and the host communities. That is my conclusion. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kennedy, for even taking your time to join us for this conversation, share your findings and insights. We really appreciate you. So I'm going to give 1 minute to Ajak and then Bior to give their closing remarks. I don't know whether Isaac is still on the call, but even if he's not, we really appreciate his time and also the insights that he has given in this conversation. Also in absentia, Monica and they were very ready to join us for this conversation. We still appreciate them in absentia. So, Bior, 1 minute, and then Ajak, 1 minute. Your closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. And I'll also like to thank all our attendees, our speakers, and all the organizations that that are represented here. And a lot of thanks goes to Brother Richie. And in my conclusion, I would like to bring us back to the question of why we see that Kenya has a lot of policies on refugees, but they are not being implemented. And I've seen this question being asked by so many people. And I think we should not shy away from the fact that these policies are not being implemented on political grounds. And it's all to do with politics. Because Kenya is as much as Kenya seems to be peaceful, I heard that peace with the absence of a democratic space where people express themselves politically or where people engage politically without fear or favoritism cannot be considered as holistic peace. And Kenya is in such a situation. As much as there's no violence in Kenya, that is the so-called physical violence, as much as there's small pockets here and there, there's still no freedom, the so-called exclusive freedom, political freedom or expression, or such as maybe the expression of that was mentioned, such as sexual orientation and all those. But at least Kenya is trying compared to some of the other East African countries in terms of the democratic space. And this has mainly been to the advocacy that most of the Kenyan advocates and the Kenyan groups, social groups have actually had. So the Kenya refugee problem is mainly to do with political will and the lack of political implementation. Because when you see that there's the lack of political will, then the policies are generated, but they are not followed up so that they become law. As much as the act is there, it cannot be implemented fully because of the lack of the political consideration. And as we also see, because I always like to conclude my talks when I'm speaking about the Shirika plan, that the Shirika plan should not be used as a tokenism mechanism, because when we are looking at how the Shirika plan is being propagated right now, we are seeing that it's being given 4 years for its first phase, or 2 years for the first phase, and then it's going to be implemented. What that technically means is that it is assuming the already existing refugees who have been protracted. An individual such as myself who has already lived for 30 plus years. When you're speaking of a policy that is going to be given for 2 other years for it to be kind of like adjusted, and I've already been living here for 30 years, then that technically means that you are trying to revert me back to not consider the 30 years of lived experience that I've had, for you to kind of like box it into your so-called policy paper that is now going to be a paper that is going to integrate me. Then technically that is just a legal way of being mischievous, and that's a legal way of not trying to kind of like honor the lived experiences of the refugees who have already been in existence, who have already kind of like integrated in one way or another. And that shows you that there's no complete political will from the system that is trying to be implemented. And this political will comes from the same fear that refugees are being seen, like the way other Kenyan populations are seen, as a political tool that can be able to change either the political dynamics within the country when it comes to the vote, to the voting seasons, or how politicians get into power. And I think the advocates, what they should be able to kind of like work more is for that kind of perception where refugees are being seen as another political inconvenience, but rather being seen as human beings who are deserving of full integration. And this full integration also considered the fact that they should be given citizenship for those who need to be given citizenship. Because as much as we know, the International Convention of Human Rights Act clearly states that when an individual has stayed for a prolonged period of time within a given host environment for either over 10 or 5 years, you should consider that individual for naturalization or being given citizenship. But when the political system is not willing or is not in place to be able to do that, that's when we see protracted, such as the case we have in Kenya, and the emergence of policies that are kind of like trying to whitewash the problem that is actually on the ground. And that's why I usually have a very negative perception of what the Shirika plan might be able to kind of like cover, because it's kind of like also trying to wash away the already existing protracted situation that the refugees communities have here in Kenya when we are looking at how long they have actually been existent. So thank you, Lucy. I apologize for extending the 1 minute. I also need to apologize on behalf of Monica Malit. She was ready to present, but unfortunately, she had a medical emergency, as well as our brother Toloso. His slides were actually ready, and they were ready for presentation, but he just also recently had also an emergency that he had to attend to. And these are things that usually crop up in such events. We usually have unforeseen circumstances. As much as we can prepare for them, they always crop up. And we also thank them in their absentia. And also we thank all of you guys who have taken out your time to listen to this important discussion. And we also hope that we continue engaging with you all. And for those whom we have not recognized, we apologize. And in Kenya, they say, tunaomba mutusamee, because the next time tutarekebisha. So asanteni sana. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Shukran.
All right. Thank you so much, Pior. We also appreciate you for the work you're doing in bringing limelight to the refugee community issues in Kenya. So especially from an aspect of the youth, peace and security landscape. So thank you so much for that. I can see a Jack dropped off, but he said, thank you all. This was an amazing discussion on the refugee issues. We also appreciate you. So finally, I am so happy to have been your moderator. I'm so honored. And now I'm going to hand over the platform to Oscar from the KCYPS to officially close this discussion. And yeah, tell us when the physical meeting, as this suggested by Ajak, is, or what's the way forward after this. Thank you so much.
Well, first, thank you, Lucy. And maybe before I just even go deep into this, there were some mentions that we were to do. And if you'll allow me, I can give 2 minutes to one of our implementing partners of this project, definitely. And Maybe I'll start with a few mentions that we were to make earlier on, where we had the presence of the Search for Common Ground Country Director, who's leading Kenya, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Somalia, Judy Kimamo. We also had the presence of, and we still have the presence of Richie Olaka from the Department of Refugees. It's a pleasure to have you, sir, as well as the co-chair Felix, who was present. Habiba, coming from District 9010, a lot of greetings from us here in the District 9212. And we hope that this is going to be an opening window for our continued conversation to open more into the future. But then just to give 2 minutes to our Quaker Peace Initiative ADR coordinator and integration officer, to this particular conversation, who is Mr. Evans Aguirre, to share a comment in 2 minutes time, and then I can make the closing remarks. So I'll welcome you, sir. Karibu.
Thank you, Oscar, and thank you, Shirika. Thank you all for this invitation, and thank you for the wonderful discussion. My name is Evans Agoya. I work with Quaker Peace Initiatives. Our program normally deals with peace building and conflict resolution, whereby we train youth and we train communities matters concerning peace building. What we as Quaker Initiative we can maybe offer is the field of integration of our brothers and refugees into the Kenyan society is maybe by offering them a field, a free space where they can maybe be able to express themselves and train about matters concerning peace building. Because we realize that we cannot be talking of one Africa, United States, and yet we still confining our brothers in the so-called refugee camps with some punitive laws. We need as Africa to move away from that. When I see my brother from Congo, I see my brother from Sudan, I should just accept him as my co-brother. Yes, there's some levels whereby they may not go past, but I think if the political class can sit down and reduce on those punitive laws, it can be better, because these are brothers who can really impact our African economy as a whole. When we allow them at least that free space to maybe do businesses and go to school, get education, like everybody, they should access health facilities. That would be wonderful. So looking forward as a Quaker Peace Initiative, we need to give our brothers, there's one speaker who said something about the conflict. Yes, our brothers are coming from conflict scenarios, and maybe they have not been given that opportunity or as a space whereby they can talk about their experiences, what they went through. I've heard from my brother Biora, I've heard from my brother Jok, the experiences they have gone through. What about those that who have not been able to get a free space where they can express themselves, what they've gone through, and how maybe they can transform into the society. So as Quaker Peace Initiative, that is our area we deal with, giving people a free space whereby they can talk about their experiences, and we train matters about community and peace building that comes with various skills on how to coexist peacefully. So thank you so much. Because of time, I don't want to take a lot of time, and looking forward maybe to working together with Shirika and supporting our brothers. There's so many things that other than just looking at them as refugees, there's so many important value addition they can bring into whatever country. You're talking of Kenya. What about those who are in Tanzania, those who are in Zambia, those who are in other countries all over South Africa? Each country at least has some people they're calling refugees. So we are talking about our Kenyan situation. What is happening in Uganda? What's happening our brothers in Tanzania and all those areas. So it's something that we need to look at it with a deeper and a longer eye as African, and we share together. Thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Oscar.
Well, thank you, Senior Evans, for that wonderful submission. And finally, I would just love to make a quick shout out to all the participants who have joined us today. This is quite tremendous, having had participants from at least 10 countries in Africa. This is quite a large milestone as we try to influence some of the reforms that will not only impact Kenya, but then there's a lot of learning that our brothers from Rwanda, Nigeria, Congo, Burundi, South Sudan, Sudan, Ethiopia, as well as Botswana, who have been part of these conversations, have tried to capture, and they'll be moving forward with it. So as it has been mentioned, from all these valuable conversations that we've had today, the insights and the ideas that have been shared from our invited panelists, it has been truly inspiring, and it will undoubtedly shape even the next stages of the Shirika plan and its entire validation process that I'm sure it is going to take its due course in the year 2025. And also, this shapes our collective efforts in terms of moving forward. From the youth space that I think we are converging, as well as from the organizational capacity, to see that we can really contribute to together to collaborate and take action towards the meaningful inclusion and the meaningful existence that we have in the community. So I want to encourage us all to stay connected. I would invite Bior to put his email address and his contact on the chat section. I have as well put mine quite well in conversing in French, but also that is the same contact that I'm going to share with you. Bienvenue to all our friends who have joined us from Congo, Paul, as well as Burundi, Mukuruenzi, and Benani from Tunisia. Let's work together so that we can achieve this great step that we are trying to move into. And I want to finally thank you for being part of this conversation, staying in here for 2.5 hours. It's really commendable for all of us. And for the next meeting of this sort, I think it will be communicated through our emails, but also tentatively we'll have follow-up meetings on the 10th of January, if I'm not correct. Please correct me, Biot. That will be a Friday, the 10th of January 2025, to see as we close for the festive season. Maybe come back and then recollect to see that we can proceed to the next stages of the conversation as we also share contributions to the Shirika plan. So with that, thank you. Merry Christmas. Let me also be the first one to wish you all a Happy New Year. And I hope we will connect and exchange more on this particular conversation. Asanteni sana.
Thank you all. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year in advance.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Our meeting is officially done. Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and Merry Christmas. Noel.
Thank you. Bye. Michael from Nigeria.
Thank you, Michael. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining
pleasure,
us.
Michael,
And
you
pass our
joined.
regards.
Bye-bye from Rwanda.
Au revoir
Oh,
from
thank you so
Tunisia.
much.
Ma salama.
Lucy, let me just remove from the chat all our guests, and then we'll continue the conversation.
No problem.
So thank you, Lucy, for the moderation. I think it was a success, and the turnout was unexpected because we have actually gotten almost close to more than half of those who had registered tuning in. So I think we can be able to say that was a success. And I think it's unfortunate Oscar has dropped out, but I think everything went pretty much well. I just wanted to thank you for the great moderation that you've actually done, and for handling this session quite well compared to how close to the event you were informed and how urgently it was put forward. So I think it was a great job, well done. And we can be able to celebrate that. And then later on, I think Oscar is coming. Let me just admit him. I'm admitting him. So as we wait for Oscar to come, I think karibu sana back Oscar. Naona
nilikuwa nimetoka haraka.
Umekimbia nje haraka, umesahau organizers wanakutananga nyuma ya tent.
Pole sana. No, it's been 2 hours seated. But
it's
been
understandable.
amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So apologies, I was just telling Lucy of what a great job she has done hosting this event and being our moderator. And it's actually a resounding success because we can be able to say that since we've gotten more than half of the registered individuals having tuned in, then we can be able to say it's actually a great success. And given the short notice that we were working with, I think we can pat ourselves on the back and say we actually made it happen. This, regardless of the huge challenges and surmountable challenges that we had, and that's something that we should be glad, and also the agencies that came on board. So I was also suggesting that we can organize maybe I'll draft a few certificates which we can send to as a form of appreciation to the organizations that have turned out, and appreciating the time that they've given us, and also the speakers that who managed to also show up. So we can just give them from the Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security, and also from organizations. We extend it as a thank you award to them. And we should also give our moderator for the great job that she's actually done. So that we appreciate our efforts and for being selfless in giving her time. So that's just what I wanted to add.
Definitely, Lucy, I think you have outdone maybe the expectation. You managed quite well. The few challenges, I think I and Bior are the only ones who have had, maybe Toloso is the one who
Oscar, you're hanging. Are you experiencing the same, Amanda?
Yeah, I thought it was on my end. I think it's Oscar's network. We should understand
also,
his network.
How do I stop the recording? Because I think...
Oh, it's okay. I can even stop it on my end. But I think when we are done, I will just stop it because this section will be edited out, and then they will just only keep the discussion side. So you can repeat again, Brother Oscar. You just froze a bit. So I think your network cut you off from where you are communicating.
Sorry, I think I stopped.
It's okay. So you're okay now.
I was saying if you can maybe just retract from the recordings, the emails that are being sent on the chat section, and then there are those that we can try as much to fetch and collect, but then there can be also that general certificate of participation that maybe because some platforms like the digital peace builders who were present, but then they did not show. We can just do an appreciation certificate that can acknowledge, and also the other consortium of money development that cuts across even the Tunisian and the Nigerian representatives, so that if we miss on the organization, let's maybe capture the consortiums that were present to acknowledge their presence. But then on the next, let's plan on the 10th.
I think generally it was honestly a very good conversation. I really loved the quality of the presentations as well as the quality of the audience. I think you could even see in the kind of engagement that they were giving is that they are very conversant with the presentations that were being made. So yeah, and also for such a short notice event that literally we started sharing out posters yesterday. I think it was a good outcome. Yeah. But we also need to do better in terms of our members within the organization, the coalition itself. I think also I felt like the Kenyan perspective was literally trying to push to hear what the host community has to talk about, but I think it was very, very limited because we don't want a scenario where it's like the refugee community talking to itself. We also wanted to hear from Kenyans themselves. But yeah, I think we can do a next series on this, and it was a good start, honestly.
Thank you, Lucy. Come back, Oscar. I think your network now is okay. You can still just maybe switch off your video and then you use them.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think, Lucy, the Kenyan perspective, I think that was the angle that everybody, I think, was trying to look forward to hearing, in that, at some point, Bior could make greetings in Dinka, and then somebody would directly want to respond in Kiswahili or in there was one response that came in Luo. So I think it was just also a way of trying to show how active the listeners were trying to pay through the conversation. But as we maybe work on this report and also work on meeting physically, I don't know if the timelines of a physical one will allow, but then it will be it is highly regarded if it's so. And that is to say, maybe in the next stages, we are going to fully maybe utilize, for such, it's because they had closed on Friday, the reason why we dropped. But then just 10 minutes, 20 minutes to the meeting, Judy Kimamo texted if the meeting is still on, and she requested for us to share the posters and everything. So I noticed we had already dropped the search for common, but then I think it is also a basis if we go into the future conversations, and also to invite us maybe tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, so that we can maybe plan the engagements. And Bior, you are here at QPI, and we had this conversation so that we can develop maybe from this first report, how do we document it to capture maybe also the attention that we will be going into the 2025. For the Kenya Coalition with Peace and Security, I think it will be complementary support that they'll want to give going forward, now that the attention is fully now going to drive, but then it will also to just ensure that the outputs of these conversations are going to also shape the inclusive YPS agenda that we want to achieve at large. But then, asante sana. Let's look at even engaging with Kina Phil Gittins from World Beyond War. It was really amazing to hear from Benani. I think she sits on the World Beyond War Africa Committee, and we can try to see that how do we ask or request for better working methods going into the future, and how do we access some resources that can help us, now that there are suggestions of conducting physical engagements within the different town halls that we have to have these engagements going forward. So with that, let's see what we develop now going forward, and also just put timelines so that we can achieve within the timelines, and also agree that we will be reporting now physically to QPI to now fast track the conversations and try to see something meaningful come out of these conversations. Santi, and back to you, Bior, maybe as you close.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Oscar, and thank you, Sister Lucy. And I think, like I mentioned earlier before, it's a success. And thank you guys for the short notice and for stepping up. And I think also World Beyond War and the likes of Phil, who actually came in during the last minute, and also our brother Guy, who also set up this. I think they will also go to listen to this conversation. So before they will be able to cut this discussion off and then post the rest of the conversation on their YouTube page, I think they'll be able to have received our appreciation and our heartfelt thanks to them. And I think in closing, I'll just be able to say I'll be able to prepare the certifications for the organizations that have attended, for the speakers that have participated, and those who could not participate because of unforeseen circumstances. We'll still have to prepare those. Then I'll share them either share them later with you, and then we see how we can be able to at least assign them and issue them to the recipients. So I have nothing much. Mine is just gratitude. I think this is one of a very successful event that we have hosted as a Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security from the short moment that we had. So asanteni sana, nashukuru sana, and I think we will be able to meet for our physical meet, and then we see the way forward from there. So
Before
please
you hang
enjoy
up,
the rest of your day. Yeah.
Before you hang up, I'm handing you over to him.
Okay. Asante.
This is for you.
Oh. Yes, my brother, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you, Senior.
Yeah, thank
Tunashukuru
you.
sana you managed to join us, and we are really
Yes.
appreciative that you gave us the space and also the time to be with us.
Thank you so much. I'm so also delighted to at least attend the meeting, which was so insightful, and so many things to be picked up from actually as brothers of this great continent. This is a discussion that needs to be carried forward and looking at the bigger picture, not narrowing our eyes on just simple things, but we will make it with our voice. We stay together and we increase the voice and we push, we don't give up. I think we can even maybe start like this, and who knows, we change the whole world and the whole country look at the issue of saying refugees in a different way. Because you can't keep on confining other brothers and sisters in the so-called camps, and yet they can be of very, very, very big added value to the economies of this Africa of ours and the country at large.
Okay. That's much appreciated, brother. Thank you for the comments.
Thank you. You're most welcome anytime. We'll work together.
Anyway, enjoy the rest of your day.
Sawa, asanteni sana. Good day. Bye-bye.